Hello, my name is Yolanda Fernandez. I'm the Public Information Manager here at the St. Petersburg Police Department in St. Petersburg, Florida, United States of America. Joining me today are two high-ranking commanders of our police force who also happen to be women. We have Major Shannon Halstead and Major Patrice Hubbard, and they're going to tell us a little bit about their work involving community policing today. Major Hubbard, if you could please give us just a brief background on your work here at the police department.
I've been with the St. Petersburg Police Department for 17 years now. I grew up in St. Petersburg, went to elementary, middle school, and high school, and worked in various areas throughout my career here.
Major Halstead.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I also have been here with the St. Petersburg Police Department for 20 years and have worked both in the Uniformed Services Bureau and the Investigative Services Bureau.
We're here to talk about community policing. Now, Major Hubbard, you deal mostly with the downtown entertainment and restaurant area. How is this a challenge for you as far as that community policing philosophy when you're dealing with businesses?
Downtown St. Petersburg is a very growing area. It is a very diverse area. There's commercial as well as residential areas. We do have a lot of condos and a lot of apartment complexes. So working with the community, you're working with businesses as well as working with residents. Spend a lot of time meeting with the residents as they have issues that come up within the area, and then working with the businesses on trying to make the two of them work together in an area where some people live as well as some people go for entertainment, dining, restaurants. There's a lot of walkers, bikers, skaters. So just working with all of them to make it work together.
Major Halstead, how does the commander employ the community policing philosophy from your standpoint?
Sure. Just when I think about the 20 years that I've been here at the St. Petersburg Police Department, I really think the community policing philosophy has really evolved during that time. You know, people talked about community policing all the way back to the early 1990s, really. And when I think about what that means to us today, I think it's more of a relational policing. I think as women in law enforcement, our strength is building networks and building relationships with people. And I think we really focus, not just the faith leaders in our community, but all sorts of different groups and organizations that I think our Chief Holloway, has really instilled in his executive team that it's important to somehow be involved with all these different organizations. He doesn't say which organizations, but he wants you to find an organization that you're passionate about and then really work together with them to build relationships. And ultimately, I think that's what the foundation of community policing is here in St. Pete, is all the different relationships that we have with all these different organizations in the city.
So let's break this down from the lower level all the way to the top. So how do you start to train your officers in this community policing philosophy? Let's talk about things like the Park Walk and Talk initiative that Chief Holloway has implemented.
The Park Walk and Talk initiative started with Chief Holloway when he got here, but prior to that, I was a community service officer, and I found that the best way for me is to take ownership. I don't just work here, but the areas are my responsibility. And I feel that it's very important as an officer and as a sergeant to be out there on the street meeting the people that live in that community. The first time that someone sees you shouldn't be the time that you're going there for a call. So if it's your area of responsibility, it's important that you are out there, not just when it's time for the police to be called, but out walking, talking, engaging with the community, whether it's going to a local store to get a cup of coffee and talk to the people that are in the store, or walking in the park, or playing basketball with the kids in the neighborhood. It's always been important to me as a former community service officer to engage with the community on various aspects, not just when it's time for the police to be called.
I want to explain that when Chief Holloway began here at the St. Petersburg Police Department about 6 years ago, he did implement a new philosophy along with community policing called Park, Walk, and Talk. So Major Halstead, if you could speak a little bit more about what exactly that is and how it works.
Sure, absolutely. And I think the beauty of the program is that it means different things to different people. Whatever you're passionate about is where you can plug in. I think there's all sorts of different non-for-profit organizations that executive team members sit on the boards. One in particular I'm thinking of, the mission was to empower women and to eliminate racism. So I participated on that as a board member, but then you also bring back everything you've learned and done as part of that organization back to the team of people here at the agency.
So what do you tell the officers under you, though, under Park, Walk, and Talk? So Park, Walk, and Talk means that every officer has a responsibility to park their patrol car, get out, walk, and talk to the people in the area they patrol at least 1 hour per week. And it has to be documented, and our communication center actually writes down the number and the time and the date and everything that they do this, so that you can look at the log at the end of the month. So what do you tell your officers about what their goal is during Park, Walk, and Talk? Because we know sometimes officers don't really want to do that.
I think it's all about accessibility. I know Major Hubbard can also talk to you about our downtown deployment team and how they are set up in a manner that they're really accessible to people. Do you want to talk more about that?
Absolutely. The Park, Walk, and Talk program works a lot better downtown for various reasons. They drive golf carts, which, being in a police car with your windows down or up, just kind of gives off one, I don't want to say not that you're inaccessible, but if somebody's walking down the street and they see a police car at the light, they're not as apt to come up and talk to them. But if there's a golf cart sitting there at the light, more often than not, somebody's going to come up and talk to them. I'm also in charge of the traffic unit. The guys that ride the motorcycles constantly say when they are at a light, somebody's going to engage in conversation, to the point where sometimes they pull into a parking lot just to get out and talk to people. And this is somebody that's not getting a ticket, somebody that's not in trouble. They'll pull over, let their children or family see the motorcycle and talk to them, just engaging with the community. We also have horses. So somebody riding on a horse, they're apt to have people more often willing to come and talk to them. Another way that I have found in different roles that I've been in the police department to engage with community is not just asking the officers, but showing them, getting out as a lieutenant or as a sergeant and park walking and talking with them throughout the community. That's helpful. As a lieutenant, if you get out with your officer and say, hey, we're going to go do a park walk and talk today, and you do it together, you're not just telling them what's expected, but you're also showing them, especially with younger officers, you're showing them how it's done. You're giving them tips that they can now put in their tool belt, so later in their career, they remember something that they've been taught or something that they've seen you do.
The other thing I wanted to share is just having worked in the Investigative Services Bureau, people really don't realize when they're out making all those connections, park walking, talking with people, that even though sometimes people don't have information to share right at that given time, you never know if something is going to transpire later on where people have called, reached back out to say, hey, I have information on that I want to share. So it really is beneficial for the officer in that they're learning to talk and communicate with citizens, but also later on when they're willing to call in and help.
And the people get a chance to see officers just as people, not just when you're coming to arrest them or when something bad happens. They have an opportunity to have a conversation. They see the uniform. Maybe they're not as intimidated by the uniform, and they're more willing to approach you. And I just want to clarify for our participants, when we say golf carts, we're not playing golf. We're actually using these open-air carts or small vehicles that we use, and it allows you to go more easily through alleyways, and when there's a lot of traffic, it allows you to maneuver on the sidewalks and allows you to get closer to the areas you're patrolling.
Absolutely, and we have two-person carts as well as four-person carts. So there are so many times if I'm downtown, I'll see an older couple or someone that just kind of stops me and says, hey, we're walking over to such and such, and I ask, hey, do you want to ride? And there's oftentimes we see officers driving, a person with small children or a person that's, has some, disabilities to their car or helping them get from point A to point B. And so they really are engaging with the community. And just to touch on what Major Halstead said, I remember early in my career when I worked midnight shift, there were many times I would park my car in an area where there would be people walking. You park 2, 3 in the morning, somebody's going to come up to you and just start talking, and we would engage in conversations. Later on, that might be the person that Investigative Services is looking for as a witness to a crime. So having those relationships and building that ability where they feel like they can talk to you has broken down barriers. And I know a lot of the investigators and detectives have said that their information comes from people who are just willing to come and call or text and just talk with the police.
And when you talk about different shifts, so sometimes an officer might say, well, I work midnights, just the example you gave. It's hard for me to just go and knock on doors or businesses are closed. But have you found some inventive ways that officers have used to talk to people even when they're working from midnight to 8 a.m. in the morning?
Well, I think one of the other areas that we've really developed as an agency is social media. And we even have a whole bunch of tip platforms where if people want to call in information, I think that helps too, the way we've networked with people.
And I know that we've had other creative ways that people have reached out to do their park walk and talks with communities.
And just as you mentioned, on midnight shift, convenience stores are open, gas stations are open. It's always good when a gas station or a convenience store sees a police officer pull in their parking lot, go in, talk to the people that are working, as well as talk to the people that are coming to the store. You never know who you might see who, they just finished, their shift, or they're going on to their shift. So I've made many relationships with people on midnight shift that were going to the gas station to get a cup of coffee first thing in the morning, or hospitals. That's another place that's always good to talk, because the people that work in the hospital, they don't live there. Sometimes they go home, so it's good to build those relationships as well.
And sometimes I think also that it's not even us reaching out to people. I think a lot of neighborhood groups reach out to us, downtown business associations, all sorts of service organizations, they actually reach out to us now too. And for the most part, if we have the resources available, we'll send an officer there just to speak to whatever the topic is that they're interested in.
We think of community policing as being more of an individual thing, but how do you actually incorporate that when you're dealing with businesses? Both of you have been commanders in areas that have businesses.
Well, downtown, there's the Downtown Business Association, and they normally meet once a month. So during their monthly meetings, myself as well as the sergeants over downtown, we both come to the meetings and we discuss whatever issues or concerns they might have. And sometimes they're business owners, but just because they're a business owner, they might be a resident in the same area. So they bring a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of issues that we can relate to and that we can try to help them solve.
But their concerns are different than the individual, aren't they, Major Halsted?
They are, and when you asked the question, it reminded me of an organization that we have here within the city that's a leadership organization. And every year they sponsor a class of 40 individuals that go through this 6-month program. Well, those people that make up the class are from all different sectors of society. They work in the hospitals, lawyers, financial advisors, teachers. It's so interesting that they bring all of the different organizations, business partners together, and they really talk about what issues are affecting different types of businesses. So I think people are excited to have their voice heard and are interested in learning about our police department. There's a huge push right now for transparency. We're going to body-worn cameras in the next few months. So I think all of these avenues that we've talked about, Park Walk and Talk, and all of the community involvement as far as organizations, it all allows people to ask questions, and it allows our organization to be transparent and open to changes. If someone has a good idea about how we should do things or how policing is evolving, I feel like people are willing to come forward and share their ideas with us now. We're very innovative and progressive, I would say.
You've brought up an interesting topic about trying to be transparent. I know that's very important right now. Let's face it, police have come under a great deal of scrutiny, not just in our country, but internationally as well, as with concerns about police brutality or police using their authority in negative ways. And you talked about body-worn cameras. How do you think that moving forward that we're going to see changes, and how are we going to face those challenges with the public perception of the police having too much authority?
I think one of the ways is just that openness, that willingness to make the change. That's something that in my 17 years, and I'm sure in Major Halsted's 20 years, we've seen a lot change and a lot evolve. The testing phases that we've gone through, there's so many officers that are willing to do it, that want to do it.
You're talking about the body cameras.
With the body cameras, that are so willing to do it, and they've had nothing but positive to say about it. And I think that with the community, giving them another avenue to show that we're willing to take that step, and it's just a part of being innovative, being willing to step out there and be the first person to say we're willing to change. We know law enforcement isn't any different than any other career. We're not perfect, we're human beings, but we're willing to say, what is it that you see that we can do differently? And we're willing to take that step to try.
How do you convince some of the older officers to move forward with things like body cameras?
I think in our agency in particular, it comes from the top down. I think we have a chief that came in 5-6 years ago who was progressive or is progressive and innovative in his ideas, and he has instilled that into everyone, and he is open to suggestions and ideas.
It doesn't mean that you're not going to take into consideration things like safety issues for police officers, and really removing authority from police officers. You're not doing that. You're just going about it a different way.
And I think there's going to be opportunities for retraining. So one of the things he's tasked us with is reimagining, rethinking, retraining, rebuilding, and seeing what our new normal looks like. You know, do we have some people that aren't going to buy in right away? Absolutely. But I would say the majority of the officers are excited about the technology because it has been tried and tested, and there was processes put in place to make sure that going forward we choose the right technology. So I think it's just part of the involvement of police work in 2020.
So we've talked about body cameras. Now, one other new program that is just right now on the table in the formative stages is our Community Assistant Liaison, our CALL program. And this involves sending social workers to some police calls that are non-criminal. And these are things like mental health issues, as well as things with transients, homeless, panhandling, those kinds of things, where police officers are called out to those issues all the time. How do you see this working with your role as officers?
I see it two different ways. The first way is I see that the amount of calls that will be alleviated from the police department, this will allow officers to focus more on the things that are the criminal in nature, as well as giving officers time to focus more on interacting with the community and just being more proactive in the amount of time that's available to do, more police work. And the other way is there's only so much training that we get. There are professionals that are much more trained and better at handling these problems, that having the right resources available and putting people in touch with the right people to help them long-term to come up with solutions is a win-win.
I think Major Hubbard spoke right to the point of that. I think, we've all been in the situation as patrol officers where we responded out to a location multiple times for the same incident. There's nothing more frustrating.
The same person
Yes.
with the same problem over and over again.
Right, and there's nothing more frustrating than wanting to help and being there to help, but you just really don't quite have the resources needed. So I think the collaboration with the community liaison is really going to hopefully create long-term solutions instead of just short-term solutions to common problems.
I did want to talk about one topic that I think is very interesting, in that even though we've had a police department since 1903, we didn't have our first woman officer until 1973. So as women who are commanders in a mostly male police force, how do you face those challenges moving forward?
I certainly think are there challenges still today, of course, but we're in a much better place now even than we were 20 years ago when I first got hired. I'm honored to be the first woman to lead our Vice Narcotics Division. Currently, it's been a great challenge. I think that as you work on different teams throughout the department, it's about the team of people that are around you as well. It's not just about you. It's about the strengths and weaknesses of everyone on the team. And I think we all just work together to accomplish whatever it is. Do I feel like there have been points in my career where I had to earn other people's respect? Certainly. But I think that once you work to prove yourself and you display to everyone else that you're just as capable of doing the job, that people are really genuinely willing to work with you and want you to be successful.
I think Major Halstead pretty much said everything that I would say. The only thing I would add is I just am a big believer in accountability, and I feel like as a female in law enforcement, that's always been something that's been kind of ingrained in me. So I've always been holding myself accountable, and I've always set high expectations for myself. So the people who I've worked with and have worked around for years, they kind of know that if they're working with me, that the expectations are going to be high. So I just think that we are definitely in a time frame with Chief Holloway that's made it clear that we're not going to go with, well, we've always done it that way. We're forward thinking, we're looking to make change, we're looking to move forward, and there's nothing wrong with coming up with a new idea and going forward with it.
We've talked about women in policing, and every country has different groups within that country, whether it's race or whether it's religion or cultural. So we have a diverse police force. We can see right here we have a white woman, we have a black woman, I'm a Hispanic woman. So we have diversity within our ranks. Why do you think that's important, and what message does that say to the community?
I think it's important that we are a representative of the area that we serve. St. Petersburg is probably, I think we just have about 270,000 people. So it's a larger city, I would say. And I think when you get out of your car and you are a representation of the area that you're serving, it's important. I grew up here. I went to school here. I went to, I still go to different events downtown and different events out west and, throughout the city. And our city is very diverse. It's a mixture of so many different types of people in different areas. We don't have, like in some cities where there are little pockets where all of this nationality or here, all of that's there. It's very spread out, but it's very inclusive. And I think with our police department, if you look at not just our command staff, but if you look at the rank and file, we have a diverse group that's good representation of the city.
And this is a constant challenge, isn't it?
I think so. I think it's something that's always been a priority for our organization. I think we continue to work on it with recruiting and retention, making sure that we're reaching out to diverse candidates.
Yeah, so if they don't come to you, you have to go. You have to go to them.
Absolutely.
Because it is. We do find that it is difficult sometimes to get women to become involved in policing and different ethnic groups to become involved in policing.
The other thing I was going to say about that is it's circling back to the community policing, but in order to build some of those relationships, I know one of the organizations that I work with, I'm a mentor for an after-school program with girls from 3rd grade to 5th grade. Well, sometimes those girls want to see someone in a position that they can relate to. And I feel like if we have a diverse team, then we're always going to be able to relate to more people.
Do you have any last words that you would like to share to our participants here about if they are thinking about implementing a community policing model, some of things that they have to keep in mind?
One of the biggest things is that it just starts with each individual. It starts with each individual taking accountability and just having that ability to go out and interact with people. Communication is key. And there are so many ways and so many different levels where you can communicate. Even the neighborhood associations, the people who attend the neighborhood association meetings, they're people who are employed throughout the city, people who are students throughout the city, and just that positive interaction that you have with them, they take that same positive interaction and they take it with them wherever they go. So having contact with people in a positive way is it just gains us so much groundwork.
Even from a command standpoint too, Major Halstead?
Absolutely. And I think I wanted to share that one of the things I did in preparation for this interview is that I looked at the World Partnership website. And on the website, it mentions that 4 of the things that's important to them are connecting, collaborating, educating, and engaging. And I think as a police agency, we do the same exact thing. It's so important for us to connect, to collaborate, to educate, and engage. To me, that really is the root of kind of like what policing, community policing is.
Thank you, Majors. And thank you for joining us. We hope that you've learned something about our police department, and we wish you well as you look at community policing in your areas.